Okay, let's get this party going. So, welcome everyone. This is another edition, another episode of PMX Academy. I'm gonna switch to Arabic. مرحبا بالجميع ب PMX Webinar PMX Artist Academy. هذا الاشي بلشناه قبل كم من أسبوع، اللي فيه كل أسبوع بنجرب نجيب حدا من الميوزك اندستري اللي حسب رأينا وحسب طلباته طبعا اللي بنفكر أو أنتوا بتفكروا ممكن تستفيدوا منه. الأشياء اللي بنحكي عليها هي أي شيء بيتعلق بصناعة الموسيقى العالمية، إن كان أشياء اللي هي عن الميوزك برودكشن، عن كيف إنه تروج حالك، كيف تعمل البراند بتاع نفسك كفنان وهيك شغلات. هذا الأسبوع معنا الأستاذ رامي. Rami is a music producer who is based in New York. He's Palestinian. I think it's safe to say you're like the biggest Palestinian producer in the pop scene, right?
No, actually, there's في واحد تاني اسمه رامي يعقوب.
Oh, okay. Okay, so
Rami Yacoub is actually he's famous for co-producing and writing a lot of stuff with Max Martin. So he did all the Oops, I Did It Again.
Oh, right.
He Spears and Sync things. He's I have to be humble and say he's definitely on another level.
But in the US.
right. But he's based in Sweden.
Yeah, right. You're right. I remember now. He did the music, or was like on the music advisor on Rami too, the TV show.
I didn't even know that. I'm the last person on earth that hasn't seen that movie. طبعا في ناس on بأمريكا لما بيشوفوا اسمه بيقولوا, "Oh, have you seen Rami? Have you seen Rami?" I'm like, dude, I have not seen Rami.
بس انه كتير بضحك الاشي انه like you're Rami, he's Rami, and there's a TV show called Rami.
I need to get a job on that show.
Yeah. كتير منكم اللي موجودين هون معنا بالويبينار التقوا برامي ب PMX بال 2019. كانت أول مرة رامي بيكون معنا هناك، كان معنا بالويبينار بتاع listening sessions. We had a great time. And we're like really honored that you made it there and you came back today to share your knowledge. Rami worked with, again, like the top musicians in the industry, from Kiesza to Akon to Lady Gaga. It's just like insane. So the plan, like to make it clear to everyone, the plan today was to go like really technical and like open a project session and like breaking down the song and going through sections. But unfortunately, because of technical problems, we couldn't do that. So we switched the thing to have like more about a conversation about music production, about what does it mean to be a music producer today. We can, of course, talk about technical stuff too. If anyone has any question, please feel free to share it and ask us either here or on Facebook. Quick note للناس اللي هون، سوري انه بنقل بين انجليزي والعربي، بجرب اتذكر انه اعمل شيء باللغتين. للناس اللي هون بيكون يعني الموجودين بالزوم, please share your contacts with other people on the chat, so like you can network while you're here. Most of the people here are gonna be musicians and music producers, so it could be like awesome if you can share your contact and we can get some kind of collaboration out of this too. Okay, so let's dive in. Rami, like, can you tell us in like, I think it's gonna take a long time, but like make it really short and quick. How did you start with the whole thing of like music production? How did you stumble upon that? When did you decide to be like full-time music producer?
So yeah, so basically, so I've been in New York for the last 12 years. I've been in the US for the last I would say like 16 years. But before that, I grew up in Kuwait, in the Middle East. And basically, you know, my mom's a doctor, but and Abed, I think you met my mom at PMX.
Yeah, of course.
Pretty
Amazing woman. Amazing.
But you know, my mom's a doctor, but she's very creative, and she used to write music when we were kids. And this one day, she bought an 8-track mixer, and you know, she just had it on there to record like a bunch of her ideas on cassette. And you know, I'm a curious kid, so I started messing with the mixer. And at the time, this was, I'm going to backtrack a little bit just to kind of show you how my interest in music kind of gauged. But into يعني بتتذكروا الجولف وور اللي صار بالكويت. During the war, my mama took me and my sister and had us live in Russia for like يعني يمكن سنتين هيك شيء عشان she had يعني خالي كان عايش هناك, خالي Rami, who I was named after, her brother. And my mom actually, she grew up طبعا بالميدل East, but she went to medical school in the Soviet Union. And back when our parents were going to college, the two superpowers at the time were the US and the Russians, the Soviet Union. So, you know, our parents either went to the US or they went to the Soviet Union for college. So because of that, my grandfather, جدي, her dad, كان يعني أول سفير فلسطيني بروسيا. They went out there and, you know, they lived out there. Her brothers and sisters, some of them stayed there. You know, just to keep us safe, she took us over there to stay with my uncle who my grandmother Teta. But when I was there طبعا يعني I was confused. يعني شو صار يعني امبارح كنت بالكويت مع أهلي اليوم يعني بروسيا. خالي يعني شافني هيك يعني متلبك شوي, وكنت قاعد يعني قدام الستيريو, كان عنده البوم بوكس, وكنت هيك عم بلعب مع ستيريو. فقال اوكي خلص خليني اروح اجيب شيء له انه هيك تديستراكتني. فراح على السي دي ستور, وهو طبعا يعني خالي ما بعرف شيء عن الموسيقى يعني ويسترن ميوزك وشيء هيك. فهي grabs اي سي دي هيك عشان السي دي cover was fun يعني entertaining. وطلعت السي دي طلعت Run DMC's Tougher Than Leather. You know, and طبعا he doesn't know anything about Run DMC. He saw 3 guys with chains and hats. He was like, probably for children. But that was my first piece of music, يعني, you know, that I feel like I owned. فطبعا I put it in a player. I started listening, and I was listening to hip hop for the first time in my life, you know, in Russia, you know what I'm saying, during the Gulf War. And it's a weird story, weird divine kind of intervention. But yeah, I just remember listening to it and listening to Jam Master Jay scratching on his turntable, and I was like, wow, what is that sound? How is he doing that? And but then I was so curious, and I would open the booklet, but I didn't show it in the Adidas, the sneakers, and I was like, oh, I want these shoes. I don't even know what they are, but they look futuristic. I was just obsessed with the whole idea of what Run DMC was. So that piqued my interest in music. But then we came back to Kuwait after the Gulf War. You know, again, my mom got the mixer. She started writing, and I was like, you know, and I remember seeing some of those mixers in some of the videos, in the Run DMC music videos. And I thought they were all the same thing. They had like SSL track. 8-channel mixer, and I was like, oh wow, it's the same thing as Run DMC. And so, you know, I started messing with it, trying to figure out how to record with it, and then eventually I was like, you know, what I really want to learn how to do is DJ as well, because I remember seeing, you know, Jam Master Jay DJing, and طبعا يعني بالكويت at the time we didn't really have any influence for the arts. طبعا now it's changed طبعا, it's becoming more liberal and في يعني more concerts وهيك أشياء. بس يعني growing up I never saw a concert in my life in Kuwait. The first
we're talking about like, sorry, but we're talking about early 90s, right?
Mid to late 90s to early 2000s, like literally like things really started حتى يعني لما تخرجت من high school, which was 2004, like it was still kind of not there yet. Like مثلا me and my friends, we did a battle of the bands in Kuwait, and the government tried to shut us down because it's haram. So it was really interesting growing in that environment, but at the same time I feel like growing in that environment made me appreciate music even more, because it's like, you know, you come here and you realize how much people take things for granted over here, you know what I mean? Like for us, at least growing up, like if we wanted a CD, we couldn't just walk into a CD store and find Chronic 2001 by Dr. Dre, you know what I mean? We would I would literally have to go to the black market to find the CD. You know what I mean? Like literally, there were the same guys that were selling like alcohol illegally in Kuwait were also selling CDs, like, uncensored CDs. Like, and I remember, speaking of Chronic 2001, that was the album that made me want to be a producer. So I remember at the time I was a rapper, and I was trash. I was the worst rapper ever. And this is back when there was mp3.com, which mp3.com at the time was kind of like SoundCloud with SoundClick or Hideaway. So you can post your own beats or post your own music, and there was a little chart as well. And I used to hit up all the producers and be like, hey, send me a beat. I'm a rapper. And they're like, yo, get out of here. You're trash. And I was like, man, screw these guys. I'm going to learn how to produce. And then Chronic 2001 came out. And I remember when Chronic 2001 came out, I wanted that album so bad. Like, and I remember my dad, he drove me to like 6, 7, 8 different CD stores all over the country. We couldn't find it anywhere. Eventually, we got to this one CD store, and the guy was like, hey, you're looking for that new Chronic 2001? It's like we were looking for actual Chronic. He's like, okay, go to this address. We'll tell him Abdullah sent you, and you know, he'll take care of you. My dad was confused. He's like, sure.
What are we buying?
Yeah. Anyway, we went to this place, and I remember the building was like, it looked like the building was like dilapidated. Yani, crackheads were living there. And we went up there and knocked on the door, and it was like, yo, Abdullah sent us from blah, blah, blah store. And he opens the door, and it's a completely different world in his apartment. It's like leather couches, flat screen TVs, Persian rugs. It's, you know what I mean? It was like a whole thing. And he opens his little drawer and pulls out a sealed copy of Chronic 2001 with a parental advisory sticker, and the sticker that says, including the single, still DRE, and the next episode. You remember when they used to have?
Yeah.
So I just remember holding that CD and just being like, wow, this is like, I went home, and because it was so hard to get for a day, I didn't even open it. I just looked at it sealed, and I was like, wow. You know what I mean? Like, and then eventually I opened it slowly, pulled it out just in case I needed to keep the plastic. I just opened it, like, you know what I mean? You would think it was like, you know, the most rare gem in the world or something. And I just remember listening to that album, and that was the moment where I was like, I need to be a music producer. You know what I mean? I was like, I don't care what it takes. I need to figure out how to make music. Because, you know, at the time, a lot of the hip hop I was listening to was sample based. But with that album, Dre didn't sample anything. He would reinterpolate some things. And مثلا لو في samples, and he doesn't directly sample them, he brings musicians to replace
play. Yeah.
And that was also when I realized I should learn how to be a musician as well. It's one thing to just program, but I should learn how to play music as well. And that was really kind of the catalyst for me to want to be a musician, and really be a producer. And eventually I graduated from high school. I went to Berkeley in Boston. I spent 4 years in Boston, and while I was in Boston, I remember I was 17. I was like, okay, Dr. Dre is a producer and he has a record label. I should have a record label too, because I'm a producer, because I'm as good as Dre. I thought I was like as dope as Dr. Dre back then. I was, and I'll get into that later, but there's this sense of delusion that we all have to some extent as musicians and producers, to believe that we're good, even if we're not, in order to get us to the point where we can be excellent.
100%.
Yeah. And you know, I started an indie record label when I was in college. I didn't know what that meant. I was just like, oh, Dre has Aftermath Records, I should start a record label too. Found this a kid who's a rapper who was in a town called Springfield, Massachusetts. And we did like a whole album, and we ended up selling the album off of backpacks to colleges. Boston is like a college town. And I used to go into record stores, and كان في Virgin Megastore هناك, وكان في كمان محل اسمه Newberry Comics, which is like the Boston kind of chain of you know, CDs and DVDs. And I used to try to convince them to let me put the CD in there, and they would just say, who are you? And fall asleep. And then eventually I kept coming until they're like, okay, here, fill this paperwork out, put like 5 copies. If people buy them, we'll let you put more copies. And obviously I would hit all my friends like, yo, go to the store and buy 5 copies right now. You know what I mean? So I would go back, I was like, oh, how did it go? They're like, oh, it actually sold. I was like, oh, wow, look at that.
That's brilliant.
Here's some more. And that was, I guess, the short answer of how I got into music, and which eventually led to me moving to New York, and delving into the business of music as well, which we can get into, you know, as this thing expands.
Nice. So, beside, of course, being a producer, you also own a record label. And how do you think this is like how important this is for like in today's world when like we have a lot of producers and artists who can like record their music at home and put the music on DistroKid? Do you think it's like important to still reach out to record labels or like go to the do-it-yourself attitude?
I think you should have the mentality to do it for yourself, and I'll tell you why. Because it doesn't mean that you can't necessarily work with a record label eventually, but I think you have to get in the habit of doing it yourself. Because I also worked at Island Records for 4 years, which is a universal music label, Island Def Jam. And you know, and I can tell you from working at a record label and being at a record label, if you don't have your stuff together, can I say shit? I don't know. Can I curse?
عادي.
المهم الماما مش but yeah, it's like, you know, you have to get your shit together because realistically, يعني مثلا you signed to a major record label, you know, at that point you're artist one of 500, right? And if there's no momentum happening in your career or in something that you're doing, the record label's not going to care about you anymore, and you're just going to be in limbo. So you have to essentially get in the habit of figuring out how to market yourself, figuring out how to essentially, you know, push your own music, how to convey your own message as much as possible, so that, you know, you have all these contingencies no matter where you're at in your career, whether you're on a record label or not. And I think obviously today there's just so many tools available to us, and half the kids that are succeeding هلا يعني بالmusic industry اللي عندهم hits, يعني if you look at the top 30, 40 Billboard charts, there are a lot of songs on there, which I know we were discussing this last night. A lot of them were initiated through like TikTok, مثلا. These artists, they all made their music in their bedrooms, like, and they all now have records on the Billboard top 40. Now, eventually, record label will come and see that momentum and say, "Hey, we want to sign you," and they'll cut them a deal, and then eventually, you know, it'll get even more enhancements to be even bigger. But the point is they got to the point that even a record label couldn't get their artists to, and that's what's very important to kind of keep in mind is, you know, we are consumers as well, whereas certain people at record companies, they're not consumers. They're in the business, so they don't have time to consume like we do. And we pay attention to what's happening. We know what's going on as fans as well. You know what I mean? So we know what the zeitgeist is telling us in the music industry or in music, period. So we can kind of keep up to date. We can ensure that what we do, you know, fits the mold, or even if it's out of the box, at least it fits the culture that we're in today. And things that even record labels don't know how to do. And you mess up, for instance, with the kid that did Old Town Road.
Lil Nas X.
Yeah, Lil Nas X, which is like was the biggest record of 2019. The way that he blew that record up was he started a Twitter page, right? He started a Twitter page that he would just post memes on his Twitter page. He would create his own memes and post it. Eventually, he did the song Old Town Road, and he found the beat online. You know what I mean? And the kid that produced it is from the Netherlands, and Lil Nas X was in Georgia, right?
I think it was BeatStars, right? Was it BeatStars?
Yeah, BeatStars, exactly. And which I know a fellow Palestinian co-founder.
Yeah, Abe.
Yeah.
Shout out to Abe.
Shout out to everybody. But yeah, so, you know, he found the beat, got on the beat, and then he was like, you know what? I have this meme page. Let me create memes around this. So he put like the song with funny horses like dancing or cowboys doing funny things, and then people started spreading it on Twitter. And the song just had a life of its own as well, because the song was so, you know, it was catchy. I mean, it was unlike anything we heard before, like a deep country drawl with, you know, trap drums and trap hi-hats. But he kept pushing it, pushing it. He was doing something that record labels with their big marketing departments can't even figure out. You know what I mean? That's what's brilliant about it. And then eventually the song was so big that radio stations in America were kind of like, were trying to get the song and they couldn't, so they would rip it off of YouTube. And keep in mind, the radio in America is a huge business, right? It is so hard to get radio stations to play your music over here. So the fact that these guys were trying to find his music and were taking the effort to rip it off of YouTube I mean, that's unfathomable. You know what I mean? Like record labels can't even get that to happen. You know what I mean? So, but it shows you the power that we have as individuals when we pay attention and when we're diligent about what we do, the things that we can do. You know what I mean? As marketers, it's like we're on social media every day. So we actually know how to market if we really sit down and think about it, because we're consuming what's being marketed to us. So I think for me, look, I think eventually if you want to do a deal with a record label, that's fine because they'll enhance what you're doing. Best, you have to get in the habit of knowing how to do it yourself and how to market yourself as well before you get to that point, because they're not going to be able to know what to do for you if you don't know what to do for yourself.
Yeah, definitely. And today, like most record labels, actually looking for people, for artists who already going on that path and already know how to do it. So they're not like the way it used to be back then, where sorry, just Dave, can you close the door? Back then when it was like label would take an artist, put like, you know, endless amount of money on the artist to break the artist out, and then today it's like, you know, when you're big, they just reach out to you when you don't need them actually.
I mean, you know, honestly, like development departments don't exist at record labels anymore. Like they put a lot of money behind research departments. They have people that do A&R research, which is they're on TikTok, they're on YouTube, they're on SoundCloud, they're on Spotify. They're looking at the radio charts as well sometimes because, you know, we have domestic radio in America, right? In the Middle East, you know, you have maybe 2-3 stations for the whole country. But here, you know, you have different markets and they have their own different stations. You might see a kid popping off in Tennessee because of a song. So they're paying attention to the media-based data and seeing what's happening. But it's all research-based now, and not the creativity necessarily anymore. It's just like, yo, this is moving. This has numbers behind it. Let's see how much we can get this for.
Yeah. Well, one of the attendees, Ahmed Abu Bakr, mentioned that there's no labels in Palestine. Well, yeah, yes and no. But I don't think, like, following this conversation, I don't think like that's an obstacle. If you like, as Rami said, like, be out there, like, learn how to promote yourself online, and, you know, keep on pushing. And it doesn't have to be like, if you don't have a label in Palestine, does not mean that you should give up. You know, there's also other labels. And today, again, like with all the tools that you have, you can do almost 90% of what the label does. The only thing that the label would bring is like probably their connections, and they will just make it shorter.
Look, you might not have a record label in Palestine, but you have internet in Palestine. You know what I mean?
True.
And internet is really the disruptor of barriers and borders all over the world. I mean, I can tell you from even when I was working at a major record label, we would look at things that were popping in Norway, things that were popping in Lithuania, like random places in the world, because it doesn't really matter what it was doing domestically. It was more what it was doing digitally, right? You can have a record that is connecting, that you create anywhere in the world, and that people are consuming all over the place digitally, like on Instagram, on TikTok. I mean, TikTok doesn't, you know, TikTok, Instagram, Triller, all these things, they don't necessarily have, they're not geo-blocked necessarily. So you can create content there and create viable content that's going to connect with people for them to pay attention to you over here. So it's everything is possible with today's resources and technology. Obviously, look, would it be great to have a record label in Palestine? Absolutely. And by the way, I'm surprised that there are no record labels in Palestine. That's something we should fix, obviously. You know what I mean? We should think about it.
There is, but not in the traditional way, the way it is in the US, because, like, you know, the scene over there is different. Right. There's like few record labels, if it's like Samer Jaradat, Platinum, and a lot of, like, you know, individuals that they're making their own record labels. But they don't work or act the same way in the US, because, like, it's different, as you said. Like, there's no really like radio stations over there where you can do the music. Like, their most work will be like printing out the CDs, or if they're doing physical, or just doing the distribution.
But there's no marketing behind it.
Not really. Like, there's no, you know, the marketing would be like just socials and stuff like that. It's not like very, you know, like a big machine that works.
Right.
And it's something that also we're working on with PMX, like, you know, trying to get those people mentorships so they can, you know, evolve. Yeah, cool. So, and like also, again, I'm gonna comment on one of the what Ahmed said here about like having money, like doing a promotion takes a lot of money. I don't think it's true. It's all about your creativity. You can like spend $1 million on promotion, but when you don't know where to go with that, where to spend that money, you won't get any results. And when you're creative, you can like spend $100 and get results. So it's like, again,
smart money. That's the most important thing.
exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's not just the money, it's the content itself. You know, it's like you can spend $1 million on crappy content and it's not going to do anything. You can literally spend, you know, $500 on something incredible, and that will initiate a spark that will go a long way. You know what I mean? And I think that's what it boils down to. And look, obviously, as creatives, for the most part, some of us believe everything we do is great. You know what I mean? And then we're like, why isn't this connecting? Why isn't this happening? And then eventually, 3-4 years from now, we listen back and we're like, what the hell was I thinking? You know what I mean? That's why it's important to have people around you that you trust. And when I say people around you that you trust, I'm not saying your friends that hype you up every single time, because your friends always think your shit is dope, even when it's not. Yeah. Unless you have like, you know, people that have keen ears and pay attention. But it's important to know what you're spending your time behind. You know what I mean? Because again, there are things that just market themselves because they're so great. You can create, like, you know, with, for instance, the Kiesza record that we did, we shot this one-take video for it, which literally the video cost, you know, nothing to make. And her brother shot it, right? Her brother was the guy shooting. He's a wedding videographer. And we just followed her down the street in New York. We had no permits. We had nothing, you know what I mean? We just had just showed up and shot it. And the video, you know, has hundreds of millions of YouTube streams. The song was, you know, a hit, #1 in 26 countries, you know what I mean? But the content was engaging, and people kind of looked at it and spread it and shared it around, you know what I mean? And you can do a lot with nothing, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, as long as you create something that's exceptional. And look, and it's objective for me to say what's exceptional and what's not. But when you get to the point where, you know, hundreds of millions of people like it, you've at least known that you've done something that is close to exceptional, you know what I mean?
So true. Yeah, 100%. And talking about Kiesza, like, how can you tell us, how did you start like working with, you know, those big artists? Like, is it you grew up together? Is it like you started working and then she became big and that opened the door for you to other artists, or how was it?
With Kiesza, it was a situation where I met her through a professor of mine at Berkeley, which is a school I went to in Boston, and she went there as well. And this one day he hit me up and he was like, hey, and this is after I graduated. I was living in New York already, and she was still working there. And he was like, hey, you should meet this girl. I just ran into her at Starbucks. I don't usually talk to people, but somehow and I don't know, she had this energy. You should meet her. She's talented. By then I met her. She came out to New York. We linked up. She came in with like a guitar, and she looked like a bohemian singer-songwriter. And at the time, I was like, I don't know what to do with this. I don't really do this music. But by then, about like 2 weeks later, she came back to New York, and she something happened where like her purse or something got stolen or something, and she didn't know what to do because she didn't know how to get back to Boston. And I was the only person she knew. So I told her, I was like, you can come here. We can figure out what's going on. You know what I mean? Blah, blah, blah. And at the time I was working on some music that was more up tempo for another artist. And I'm working on it, and I turn around and she's dancing to it. And I'm like, when did this happen? You're a dancer? She's like, yeah, I was a dancer. You know, I grew up dancing. I was like, why are you hiding behind the guitar? I don't know, because this is what I'm doing now, because I learned how to play the guitar when I was in the military, and I was, you know, trying to help people fall asleep in the Navy ships. I was like, okay, of course you do. But I was like, do you want to try singing on this? And she was like, sure. And that was the first time she recorded something electronic or something that was not acoustic or whatever. And potential there, you know what I mean? So that's kind of how we linked up and how we decided. But really with her, you know I said that when I was in high school, in college, I started a record label. That dissolved, and then I started another record label years later. After working in the business for some time, you know, doing in the music industry, doing A&R, working with a record label and a publishing company, I learned a lot about, you know, what not to do or what to do, being in the system. And for me, you know, as a kid growing up, and I'm sure a lot of people feel like this that grew up overseas, as a kid growing up in overseas, we consume so much American and Western content, right? The essence of culture and music and art comes from America. So, a lot of the dreams that artists have overseas, hatta the biggest artists overseas, like even if they're the biggest artists in their country, they feel like a little bit of a void in their life until they have success in America, right? Everyone has this, like, you have to have success in America. And I remember when I came here, you know, I had the same mentality, but بعدين يعني when I did the Kiesza thing, I was thinking to myself, I was like, you know what? America is just a footprint to the rest of the world. There's so many countries out there. Why am I thinking linear? Why am I thinking that it has to be here in America? And when we did that, the record that broke her, which was this record called Hideaway, it was around the time that the UK had this little kind of bubbling scene of like the resurgence of like 90s house music that was happening. You had Closure, you know, you had the Route 94, all these guys kind of popping up. So I was like, okay, there في فرصة هون. So I was like, why don't we when I grew up on hip hop. So I remember there was a lot of like 90s house music at the time, and the difference between the house music then and at the time when we were doing the Kiesza stuff was back then it was driven by these women with big voices, you know, Martha Walsh, CeCe Peniston, Robin S. Whereas in the current time it was by the DJs. The DJs were the superstars. So I was like, why don't we just put another woman behind it, like a woman with a big voice? And that's how we decided to go down that route in the genre of you know, what the song eventually was. But I also knew that the UK was where that was happening. It wasn't happening in the US, even though I was based in the US. And, you know, I was working at a major record label in the US. And I was like, you know what, we should. And I didn't want to, at the time, I didn't want to sign it to the record label. I was like doing it on the side, paying out of my own money, you know, I mean, creating the content and deciding, okay, we're going to go to the UK and we're going to break this in the UK.
Nice.
And then eventually, you know, we did the deal with the record label because, you know, I was working there and they're like, yo, what are you doing? Like, are you going to, you know what I mean? But again, it's hard to explain these things to people in certain companies even when you're in the system. It's hard for certain people to see something happen until it happens, you know what I mean? Because you're in the system of a record company, you're more concerned about meeting your numbers to some extent than actually, you know, taking the time to create content or taking the time to you know, find something that's tangible that you can't even explain. So I think, you know, for me, again, this is why it's so important for me, and I tell all the artists, you know, don't worry so much about record companies and businesses. Figure out what you're trying to do first. Build your own team, you know what I mean, before you try to figure out how to be a part of another team. You're essentially the hot spot of your team. You're the artist, right? And this is for the artist too, right? Essentially, because I know this is a production seminar, but the artists are the ones that think about record deals and mission producers. So that's why I'm talking about that as it relates to record deals. You know, you're essentially the hot spot as the artist. You have to build the team around you, you know what I mean, that understands you, but that you understand and trust them, and that they keep you centered as well. You know, there's a saying like, no man is an island, you know what I mean? You can't do this on your own, but you also have to remember how you got there when you eventually get there, because, you know, I've seen a lot of people in this business come up with their own teams, and then eventually, you know, the egos get the best of them. Because look, when you're in this business and you're an artist, everyone's praising you. No one's saying, oh, manager this, manager that, the marketing person home, hey. Everyone's just you, the artist. But if you're not smart enough, you start to believe you're the only reason you got there, because all you're doing is hearing your name. And then eventually you feel like, why do I need this person anymore? Why do I need that person? And that's when everything falters. And I've seen like dynasties like get disrupted and destroyed as a result of that. And then you have people like when you think about one of the most successful artists in the world right now, Drake, right? Drake still has the same team that he had from the beginning till now. It's rare. I've rarely seen many people do like, but there's a reason why he's the most successful artist in the world right now, because he still has the same team. Which, by the way, his team are Arab as well. His manager, Abed Hathot, the Lebanese, and his producer Noah Shabib. Lebanese.
That's crazy. I think like the team is the key here. Like thinking about one of the examples is in Palestine. I think it was in the last couple of years, There's an artist called Chab Jadid who started with another group called Platinum, like they did the label. And I think was one of the best examples of how important to have a team. And again, like the team is the key here. And also, well, if we're talking about teams and collaboration, do you have any tips for like, because like we know that there's a lot of producers who are producing their music, but they can't find the artist because, you know, the situation or whatever is the reason. And on the other hand, you have a lot of artists who can't find like, you know, the right producer or how, like, do you have any tips on how to start even building that or building your team and collaboration, you know?
Yeah, I mean, as a producer, and it's funny you say that because especially in the US, I know a lot of producers that are constantly trying to chase placements and they're trying to chase bigger artists. You know, they're like, how do I get my beat on this? How do I get my beat on that? And I always tell them, I was like, don't worry about that. You know what I'm saying? Focus on being the sound behind an artist, because a lot of the biggest producers that we can think of, they all came up with an artist. You know what I mean? Especially in the hip hop world too.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like, you know, Metro Boomin and Future, you know what I'm saying? For instance, Jetson Made It and The Baby, you know what I mean? Dr. Dre and Snoop. I mean, you can constantly, you know, although Dr. Dre, you know, more Dr. Dre and NWA. But at the end of the day, you know, here's the thing. If you're a producer and you get a beat on like Drake's project, for instance, that's great. You know what I'm saying? That's amazing. But Drake is going to sell because he's Drake. You could send him like a kick and a snare and a fart sound and he hops on it, it's going to be a hit. But at the end of the day, if you're the producer behind an artist, you know what I'm saying? And you're the part of the reason why that artist built their fan base. I mean, that's so much more special. That gives you longevity in this industry. You know what I mean? Because it's so hard to break an artist in this business. You know, as we know, in many different capacities, it's hard to break an artist as a manager. It's hard to break an artist as a producer, as a record label. It's hard to break an artist as an artist, right? If you think about it. So the moment that you're behind something like that, it gives you longevity in this business. And I think that's why, for me, it's more important to think that way than to think about, oh, how do I, you know, get on this? I've seen so many producers that are incredibly talented waste their talents trying to figure out how to get on other waves as opposed to creating their own waves. And you know, and at the end of the day, I just think from the collaboration perspective, it doesn't really matter like where you are. You can collaborate anywhere. I mean, in the hip hop world, for instance, right now, there are producers that are creating samples, for instance, where they'll send packs of like loops, of musical loops to other producers on Twitter. By the way, they're all hitting each other on Twitter, hitting each other on Instagram. Believe it or not, a lot of these bigger producers in the hip hop world, they don't have the type of ego that other people do. So it's like you could be some kid in Germany or some kid in Palestine or some kid in Ghana, whatever. You send them like, here's a pack of like 15 loops, and if there's something good in there, they'll listen to it and they'll build drums around it, and then all of a sudden, you know, your song is on blah blah blah's album, blah blah blah's album. I've seen that happen constantly, you know what I mean? And sometimes we also feel like you know, we feel like, I don't know, if I hit this person up, they might not pay attention to me, or no, I don't want to hit this person up and seem like I'm needy, which is stupid. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Don't be ashamed to get yourself out there by any means necessary. I mean, obviously, don't hurt yourself and other people doing it, but you know, but don't have this ego that, you know, oh no, I have to be this person or I have to get on their level. I'm not trying to collaborate with them because I'm trying to be on their level. No, I mean, collaboration is key here. And I think that, you know, reaching out to these people, they don't care where you're at. They just care that you're making dope shit at the end of the day. You know what I mean? And that's the amazing thing, is that we can connect. The same kid that can connect to a producer in Atlanta from Palestine it connects with that producer the same way a kid from Atlanta might connect with a producer in Atlanta on Twitter. There's no difference, you know what I mean? And sometimes these people don't even meet each other. There are producers that have made hits together, you know what I'm saying, that have never even met each other, and they live in the same country, in America. So imagine if you live in Palestine, you know what I'm saying, or wherever you're at, it doesn't matter, just create dope content. Pay attention too, which is very important. And this is the one thing I want to really stress, is that the fact that, you know, a lot of people in music, that create music, we feel like, you know, we don't need to pay attention to what's happening because we're trying to create something new or something special. But I don't think that's the right attitude, because you know, this isn't a hobby. If it's a hobby, by all means, do whatever you want. Don't listen to anything. Don't pay attention to anything. But if this is what you want to do for a living, imagine me telling you as a doctor, okay, cool, you graduated in 1986. Don't open any medical advancement, you know what I'm saying, like books or anything like that. Next, you know, between now and 2020, you'd be the worst doctor in the world. You know what I mean? You have to pay attention. And there's a reason why, think about it from this way, there's a reason why a deaf person can't talk. If nothing comes in, nothing comes out. You know what I mean? You have to listen. Pay attention to what's happening musically. Pay attention to the peers in your business. If you're a hip hop producer, who are the hip hop producers that are making it in your industry? And they're literally a click or a DM away. You know what I mean? Same if you're a, you know, if you're an artist and you're trying to collaborate with a producer, it's like, just pay attention to what's happening, you know what I mean? And don't feel like you're better than everything else. And that's the problem. Like creative people, sometimes we feel like, oh, we're creating the next wave, or, you know, we don't need to pay attention to this or pay attention to that. But you have to, if this is what you're doing for a living. And you don't have to love all of it. Definitely not. You can love what you love and what you gravitate towards, but you have to pay attention to it. That's how you're successful. And I'll tell you now, the most successful people I've seen in this business are essentially not the most talented, like from what we think of as like the talent, their talent abilities, but really the hardest working and the ones that are just mass connectors. They're hustlers. You know what I mean? It's like they're not incredible what they do, but they know how to get themselves into situations. They know how to connect with people. They know that they understand the human element of it all. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's important. Be confident enough to reach out to people. Feel like you deserve to reach out to that person. Doesn't matter what level you're at. You know what I mean? Maybe you're not at that level yet, but you just never know. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You have to get in that habit so that even if you're not at that level now and you get to that level eventually, you know how to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100. I remember yesterday we were talking about the type beats on YouTube, which is like another thing that it's booming over here. It's been booming for the past 2 years, even more, right?
Yeah, I mean, so for those who may not know what type beats are, it's essentially these producers will make a beat that may sound like a Drake beat or may sound like a like a Lil Wayne beat or whatever, and they'll say Lil Wayne type beat or Drake type beat or DaBaby type beat, or even on the pop space they'll say like, you know, Demi Lovato type beat. And you know, you have a lot of artists that are looking for similar beats that feel like that, and they'll find it on YouTube, they'll find it on SoundCloud. And you'll notice if you go on YouTube and look this up right now and type whatever type beat, you'll see some of these YouTubers, these producers have like thousands to hundreds of thousands of subscribers on their YouTube, and they're also making money off of it, by the way.
Yeah.
You know, like these producers, not only are they putting their beats on their YouTube for producers to find, but they're also making a monthly income off of the streams off of these beats. And they're thinking, and they're marketers too. They're like, okay, who's the hottest artist right now? Who are the top artists? Roddy Ricch is number one. Okay, Roddy Ricch. You know what I mean? And a lot of hits that you might hear, like for instance, you know, Trap Queen. You know what I'm saying? By Fetty Wap was a type beat. You know what I mean? The producer and the artist never met each other until the song came on YouTube, and the producer's like, oh shit, that's my beat. You know what I mean? But that happens a lot. You know what I mean? And it's really about you creating your brand at that point. And that's a fundamental thing you need to think of as a producer. Even I know with the artist, it's all about thinking of your brand, but as a producer, you need to think about how to brand yourself as well. And again, these type beat producers are doing an excellent job at that. And they're literally just kids in their bedroom. You know what I mean? Some of them have never even, you know, left their town. And now all of a sudden, you know, they're on the Billboard chart or on the UK chart or whatever. I mean, even what's his name? Pop Smoke, you know what I'm saying? Like, you know, he does this sound, this drill sound. It's now called New York drill, but it really came from the grime scene in the UK. It's UK drill. But he was looking for certain type beats online and found that drill beat. But he didn't know anything about drill. He's like, oh, this sounds cool and different. Rapped on it. And now we have a whole scene in New York, like a whole, and the kid producers from the UK, you know what I mean? Like, and now we have like this whole drill scene in New York that's completely revitalized the city, you know what I mean? And this is all because people are creating and they're uploading, they're creating their own brand, their own space. And you know, and they're paying attention to what's happening in their market as well, and paying attention to what's happening in their world at the end of the day. And I'm just telling you, I know it's easy for me to say that, oh, it's at the grasp of your fingertips, but it really is. You know what I mean? It's not as complicated as you might think it is, especially if you're creating quality content. If you're not, then that's fine. You need to continue to stay diligent and really sharpen your craft. You know what I mean? So that you get to that point.
Yeah, yeah. And like again, all those artists and producers and other producers, they're all looking for the next like unique sound.
Right.
So just, you know, yes, do type beats, but at the same time keep it creative and keep working on your sound and improving your sound.
And by the way, there's nothing wrong, by the way, even in the beginning stages of you figuring out your sound, there's nothing wrong by recreating other people's sound. You know?
Oh, definitely.
That's how that's how you figure out, you know, you have to learn how to play the same 12 notes everyone does in order to create a symphony. You know what I mean? Like, it's completely fine. And all our beats all sound like other things until eventually we stumble on our sound. And by the way, I will tell you this, in my experience and most of the people I've seen, people that try to create a new sound don't usually figure out how to create a new sound. You have to kind of create, you have to get in the habit of creating until you stumble upon this new sound. You know what I mean? And I just feel like stay at home and say, I'm gonna create the next new thing, and stay in their box. They drive themselves nuts because they're not gonna create anything that's new for the most part, or anything that at least is new enough for people to feel like they want to engage with. So that's why for me, it's like, don't feel any shame about being inspired by things and recreating other things that feel like sounds of other things. I mean, the whole type beat movement is literally that. It's like, you know, my type beat is a Drake, so I'm recreating 4D sound or Boy Wonder sound. You know what I mean? My type beat is Future, I'm creating Metro sound or Mike Will sound, etc., etc. So I get in that process of just creating. You know what I mean? Don't stop creating. That's the most important thing, whatever it takes. Even if you're inspired and you want to recreate things you've heard before, that's completely fine as well.
True, 100%. It's like also as a guitar player, like every guitarist has his own sound, and you get to that sound just by, you know, learning other people's songs and playing the guitar, and you don't like, you know, oh, I'm gonna like sit down and like tweak my sound till I get this unique sound.
Right, exactly.
It will never work like this.
Yeah, totally. Every guitar player that has his own sound, you know what I mean? Eventually, I mean, it didn't start by having their own sound, you know what I mean? It's all compounding influences and things they've learned that eventually creates the new sound. But that's why it's important to constantly intake and listen and you know what I mean, and apply as you listen, and not feel like you're better than, you know what I mean? We're not better than anyone. We're not better than anyone, you know what I mean? And they're not better than us necessarily, you know what I mean? Or the potential that we have.
True. Well, I wanted to ask you about your label. Can you tell me about, like, how do you decide to work with a specific artist? I know you started to work with a new Latin musicians, which he sounds amazing. Can you tell us about, like, a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Well, for me personally, and everyone has their different way of kind of working with other artists or connecting. For me, vicinity is important. You know what I mean? For me, I want to bounce my energy off of you. You know what I mean? Because for me, I like developing an artist from scratch. For me, when I sign an artist, it isn't just about producing the artist. It's about figuring out the brand, figuring out the visuals, how we take it from 0 to 100. Because even though I do produce and create music, there's also the other side of me from working in this business that thinks about, you know, marketing and thinks about, you know, how to get him from, you know, a person that I met at a coffee shop to a person that's playing in front of 30,000 people, you know, 2 years from now or 3 years from now or whatever. And I think for me, vicinity is important in order to understand that. So a lot of the artists I work with are really artists that are in front of me. You know, I mean, people that I sit down with, we collaborate, we try different things, people that trust me as much as I trust them as well. And that's why I also work with a lot of artists that don't necessarily have much going on, or that haven't really experienced any form of success or anything, because sometimes people that experience certain things think that this is the way that it needs to happen ongoing. I'm working with artists that haven't really even had a foot to experience or anything in this business yet, or experience any sort of, you know what I'm saying, success, whether it's, you know, 500 people liking them or 500,000 people liking them, whatever it is, because it allows them to learn as well, and to be open to learning. From my experiences, as much as I learned from them as being people that aren't in the business, because sometimes we're so caught up in this industry that it's nice to have people around us that aren't necessarily, you know what I mean, like compounded by it, or aren't necessarily blinded by it either. You know what I mean? You experience the industry again from scratch when you work with people like that in different ways, because they don't know anything about it. They're like, oh wow, look, my song is Spotify just posted on a playlist. That's a good thing, right? I'm like, yeah, that's an amazing thing. Whereas an artist that's experienced, like, yeah, of course, I've been trying to get this for a while, but so what else can I get? You know what I mean? And they're just like impatient and whatnot. Whereas artists, everything is like a new experience, and I like that because I get to live those new experiences with them. Whereas being in the industry for so long, I always use this terminology. You feel like a magician at a magic show, because if me and you go to a magic show, we're like, oh my God, he's doing some magic shit. If we're magicians, we're like, yeah, I know how you did that. Yeah, I know how you did that. And every now and then you might see something you've never seen before as a magician, but you don't go, wow, it's magic. You go, oh, that's it. I'm going to go home and figure out how to recreate that. You don't just appreciate it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's nice to experience that with people that don't have that, you know what I'm saying, that experience in the business. You're reliving those moments you had when you first came into the industry with them, through them. And for me, and hard workers are really important too. I mean, you have to outwork me at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Like, that's so important. I'm going to work, as hard as I can for you, but you have to like outwork me. You have to embarrass me with how you work. You have to make me feel like crap for not working hard enough to the level that you are. You know what I'm saying? But those are kind of the things I look for personally. You know what I'm saying? Because, and talent is important, obviously, for sure. I mean, that's the spark that kind of makes you gravitate towards that artist at the end of the day. But the talent doesn't have to be fully polished. It just has to have potential. Because I like the possibility of helping polish that talent. You know what I mean? Because I've worked with artists before that are very talented, know exactly what their sound is, know exactly what they want to do, and I enjoyed that, but not as much as an artist that's still trying to figure it out. Because at that point, when you're working with an artist that knows exactly what they're doing, you're on autopilot with them. Whereas when it's someone who hasn't figured it out, you're just kind of figuring out with them, and you have all these opportunities to try things, and you know what I'm saying, and enhance and expand what they're doing, which in turn teaches you new things as well. You know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. And I know from your experience that you worked with artists in the US and outside of the US. Is there a difference between working with someone who's based in the US and someone who's like from the Middle East?
I mean, to be honest with you, humans are humans at the end of the day. You know what I mean? Obviously, our experiences and our environments create the things that influence us or that veer us into different trajectories and different sounds. But look, as a person from the Middle East, I would love nothing more than to have like the next Drake that is like an Arab, you know what I'm saying, and be behind that. I mean, that's, of course, it's a dream, you know what I mean? 100%. We all need that for us. Because when we grew up in the Middle East, we have this idea, the society tells us that music is taboo, we're supposed to be doctors or lawyers or engineers. And, we don't really have examples of people succeeding at an elite level in music that look like us. So when something like that happens and you're behind it, I mean, it's incredible, because it's not only fulfilling for yourself, it's also fulfilling for your whole community and fulfilling for the prospects of the future of the creative people in the community, because they're not growing up looking at that person being like, I can be like that. It's possible.
Yeah.
Even better if it's somebody from the Middle East that lives in the Middle East, because, it's one thing to be like, oh shit, he's an Arab American, but Arab Americans, and that would be incredible as well, obviously, but Arab Americans have access to these things. But when it's like an Arab in the Middle East that grew up in the Middle East, has the success and gets to the point where they have the same access as the people that grow up here, I mean, it shows you that anything is possible. You know what I mean? Which I do believe anything is possible, and I believe that it can happen for sure. But some people just need that extra, push, or that extra like example to make them feel like that. And it doesn't, and not just one. I want to have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I someday we dominate the whole industry if possible. You know what I mean?
Amen to that.
Yeah, but
yeah, it's it. Honestly, I really believe it's going there, especially now with all the interest of the major labels in the MENA region. Now they're like more into Africa, but I think it's gonna be like, it's gonna get to the Middle East at some point where, I really believe the next big thing should be coming.
And by the way, me from my perspective, as I'm consuming what's happening in the Middle East, I will say that in the MENA region, North Africans are probably right now at the upper echelon of that. I mean, what's happening in Egypt, what's happening in Algeria, like, them mixing trap and Afro beats. I mean, they're doing competitive stuff. Like some,
Yeah.
like there's this rapper in Egypt, Wegs, who, you know, like,
Oh, yeah.
incredible. Like, I listen to him, I'm like, dude, you're young thug, but you're speaking Arabic. That's what you like. Everything he does, even his producer, you know, DJ Toti is Egyptian, and these guys are creating competitive stuff, like things that I'm like, I listen to it and I'm like, this could play over here and people would fuck with it. You know what I mean? It was the first time in a long time that I actually heard something like that, where I was like, oh my God. Then I started to really delve into the North African region, and I was like, these guys are, you know, there's something in the water there. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I mean, you know, Egypt, you know, is always known to be really kind of, you know, you know, the hub of I guess it was Egypt and Lebanon, but Egypt first, obviously, in terms of all the biggest musicians we grew up on, you know, Kulthum, Abdul Halim, all these people, and the industry there is, you know, and obviously they have the film industry as well. But when I see what they're doing, and I think about, you know, people doing the same thing, the Sham command, I mean, I think sky's the limit. And I think that if we look at the Latin market right now, the Latin market is a great indicator of what music can do regardless of language barriers, right? The Latin industry is one of the top booming industries in the world right now. And
Yep.
Sure, people might not understand what J Balvin or Bad Bunny is saying, but they can dance to it. People understand the language of rhythm at the end of the day, you know what I mean? And that's an indication to me that we can get there as well. I mean, even this is a kind of corny example, but it's still a similar example. But Psy, remember Gangnam Style? No one knew what the hell he was saying, but you were dancing and moving to the song. You know what I mean? And I think language doesn't need to be the barrier we think that it is. You know, because I also know there are a lot of Arab artists that are like trying to sing in English. And I'll say this honestly, some of y'all need to stop singing English because the accent is not sexy. You know what I mean? Like, don't do that. Be proud of your language. You know what I'm saying? Create the best thing that you can with the Arabic language. Let people hear the Arabic language. When people think of Arabic language, they shouldn't think of it as, you know, a bunch of crazy ISIS people. They should think of it as incredible, because you know, in the Western world, people that don't understand us or whatever, when they think of the Arabic language, they think of, you know, what they're seeing on TV. They think of, you know, people saying Allah Akbar, you know what I mean, and all that stuff. I mean, I have countless examples where I'm in a studio and my mom calls me and I'm walking around and I pace when I'm on the phone. I'm walking and talking to Mama Bil Arabi, and they're just looking at me like, what's going on? And I'm like, you know, oh, you know, the Arabic language is beautiful. You know what I'm saying? It's a beautiful language. And, you know, don't worry too much about like, oh, I need to do English in order for, you know, for people to accept what I'm doing. No, like people sometimes try to conquer the world before they conquer their village. You know what I mean? It's like, don't worry about that. Be substantial in your environment. Grow outside of your environment. Grow outside of your region as well. You know what I'm saying? Like, be big in your village. Be big in your country. Be big in your region, and then, you know, also be big. Let the force of that enhance, you know, how big you can get all over the world. You know what I mean? And again, language barriers are just, I mean, we understand each other intensely right now. I mean, think about it. You can go to any article in the world right now and open it up and you can translate it right away. You know what I'm saying? Like, we're all speaking the same language nowadays, and technology allows us to do that. And I want to urge people, you know, don't feel that you can't have intense success representing who you are to the fullest extent of who you are. You know what I mean? Don't feel pressured. Don't feel like, oh, it needs to be like this. I need to sound like this person to be like that. You know what I mean? Like, and again, what Wegs is doing, I think, is incredible, because people are talking about him over here as well. You know what I'm saying? They're like, oh yeah, you know, people, you know, like, yeah, the kid joint, man, that shit hard, bro. You know what I mean? Like, and you play it for people, and they connect with it. They don't know what he's saying, but he's, again, yes, he's tapping into like a genre that is considered Western, but he's doing what he's doing. He's speaking Egyptian slang. You know what I'm saying? He's talking about his reality. Because the thing that blows my mind is when I see Arabs talking about, yeah, you know, South Central, and I'm like, dude, you fucking live you live in the Middle East. I live in South Central. You've never even been. What are you talking about? You know? Like, I don't want to know what's happening in South Central. I want somebody from South Central to let me know how it goes. I want you to let me know how it goes in your neighborhood. I want to know more about your neighborhood. I want your perspective. You know what I mean? And that's exciting to me.
Yeah, 100%, man. One of the latest songs that has been exploding on TikTok is, I forgot the name of the guy who sing it. He's actually an actor. It's called Boom Boom Boom.
Ahmed Ramadan.
Muhammad Ramadan.
Yeah.
That like it's going crazy. I'm not talking about in the Middle East. I'm talking about here.
By the way, like this song, like there are people in America dancing to it. And
Yeah.
create TikTok memes to it. Like it's insane.
Yeah.
Mahraganat, the genre is mahraganat.
Yeah.
I mean, this thing is really blowing up actually, and a friend of mine is going to be working it because Caroline signed it, and a friend of mine who's like who does TikTok, this is what he does essentially. He does TikTok campaigns, and he's Iraqi as well, which is good.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like this is going to be the and I was so excited to hear that this could potentially be that big. Like, if that song enters the Billboard 100 as an Arab song, you know what I'm saying? Like just a full Arab song, that would be the first time in history that ever happened. You don't understand how special that would be. And بس إنه يعني أغنية عربية بس كمان يعني فيها طبلة يعني it's literally an Arab song. You know what I mean? So I'm excited about that. Stuff like that gets me really excited. And it's even more exciting when you're an Arab in America, because imagine like people are into it and they're playing it and you're listening to it different than they are. You feel proud. You're like, oh my God, now you're getting down to it. Not now, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It's true. You feel proud until they ask you to translate the song.
By the way, they did ask me to translate the song. The guys that were working it were like, yo, can you translate what this is? Like, what? I'm like, well, the guy is saying that, because I know the song is kind of funny. He's saying, my bashrab, he's saying he doesn't drink. By then somebody gave him juice, but I guess it's alcohol, so I guess he's drunk now. And they're confused. They're like, this man, Muhammad, why is he drinking? I'm like, don't worry about it. Like, hard, bro.
Absolutely brilliant. Thank you so much, man. Like, we could go forever, but again, like, we really thank you for all that. Really appreciate it. Before we go, I just want to check if anyone has like one last question. Thank you, Rafi.
Am I missing like some chat box or something that I'm not seeing?
If you click on the chat next to the share screen, you should get the box. Let's see.
Sorry,
how can we reach out to Rami? You can send us Ahmed, just you have my email, send me whatever you want and I'll forward that to Rami. What else? Anything else? Okay. Anyone has like, again, it was supposed to be like a more technical masterclass or webinar, but because of technical difficulties, we're not doing that. So if anyone has any technical question about music production before we leave, I'll ask one. From the top of your head, can you give me like your top 3 plugins that you can't live without them?
Well, it's interesting because what I use to produce music is actually Reason, right? And I know not a lot of people necessarily use Reason, but in Reason, you don't necessarily, there are a lot of built-in sounds and what are called refills. And for the longest time, Reason, not until the last 3-4 years, didn't allow you to use VSTs. So you would have to kind of be conditioned to using the sounds. So as a result, I've been using mainly the Reason sounds, but I can tell you I don't use Silent or any of these things that people use, but I can tell you, some things I like to do, like RVox, right? Which is a plugin. It's for the vocal. I put that on the 808. Like put a RVox on your 808 and pump that, and you'll hear some crazy shit.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
That shit makes your 808 knock. And obviously use it on vocals too. I love it in vocals. But I love using RVox. There's actually this other plugin. I don't know if you're familiar with it. I'll tell you who makes it because I forget the maker, but it's called RC Color. It is okay. So it's XLN audio, and it's called RC20 Red Color. So what it does is it takes your audio file and makes it feel like a sample. You can add vinyl noise to it. You can make it kind of almost like a warbly. You can add distortion to it. But a lot of producers in the rap in the hip hop industry use that. It's like one of the most overused plugins, but it's a really great plugin, and it just makes everything sound cooler.
Yeah.
Like I said, XLN audio makes it. So it's that. And then the other one is this plugin called Halftime, which is made by, which if you have Fruity Loops, I'll tell you the name of the, okay, so Halftime is made by Cable Guys. And that's there's a built-in ability to do that on Fruity Loops. So because it was really popular to do it on Fruity Loops, I guess they created this app which you can use on any program. And what it really does is it just kind of half times your record and makes it kind of and you can set the time signature of how you want to half time it, but it really makes you kind of add this cool sound to it. I would definitely recommend checking it out. So those are my three favorite plugins.
Thank you so much. Okay. Can shed some light on such experience.
Yeah, Grossbeat. Yes, Grossbeat.
Grossbeat. Okay.
That's what I'm trying to remember. Yep.
I need to write that down.
But Grossbeat is only something you can use on Fruity Loops if you use Fruity Loops.
Yeah. One of the last thing I actually I was blown away when I found about it is if you put the OTT on the master bus, but like you use it for 5%, it will just like improve your mix. Like it will give you that insane sound, and it works.
Actually, there's so I don't actually put anything on my master mix, but there is this website which you guys might have seen it promoted at some point. But there's a website called eMastered. I don't know if you know about it, but it's literally this website where you sign up for it, you get an account, and you can upload your music and it masters it for you. Actually, it's like and you can do two types of masters. You can either just have it mastered for you and then tweak it, or you can put a reference master in there. Like let's say there's a track you like that's vibe and it feels similar to what you're doing, put it as a reference master, put yours, and then the computer automatically masters it to feel like that record. It's actually really interesting. We use it a lot.
Nice, amazing. I think the Isotope also do that, the Isotope 9.
Isotope, it's a great plugin, but again, the way that I have Reason routed, I don't really put anything on the master bus.
Yeah. Cool. Well, I just like, I think also we could go on this technical conversation for another hour too. Thank you so much. We covered a lot of topics in this conversation. The conversation will be live, will be also uploaded to YouTube, so people who couldn't make it to this one can catch up later. In a couple of weeks, we'll come back with another webinar, and hopefully we can like see you again in Palestine, man. When this virus,
I was really disappointed that I couldn't make it out this year.
Yeah, we're looking forward to that.
It is what it is. I mean, I'm sure when this whole thing is over, we'll take less things for granted, and we'll be more social. Our events will be way better, way crazier. You know what I mean? We'll actually talk to each other at the events now.
So true.
I'm excited about the prospects of the new world.
Can't wait for that. طيب شكرا كتير عن جد، شكرا رامي، شكرا للجميع اللي كانوا معنا. كمان مرة إذا في عندكم أي سؤال، إشي اللي ما حكيناش عليه، تقدروا تبعتوا لنا ميل وإحنا بنوصل الإشي لرامي. وشكرا، هذا هو. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Take care. Bye everyone.